More Than Rich podcast. Welcome to the show. Today we have Calvin Schwartz, a seasoned journalist, novelist, and founder of Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. With over 3.5 years of experience in producing and hosting engaging video interviews, Calvin brings a wealth of knowledge from his work in new media, editorial writing, and social advocacy. Welcome to the show.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Joe, this is actually, I was really looking forward to this because on the front end, how we connected, you had done your due diligence and all the research and went out of your way to want to learn about me and invite me to do this. And I'm really impressed because I've been doing this stuff for a bunch of years, and I've never really encountered anybody who really plunged into doing the proper stuff like you did. So that was really impressive. So I guess you want a little bit of a background on how I guess I wound up here.
Upbringing. What was it like being a kid and getting interested in, writing? Writing's a big one.
Okay, so there's an illusion here. The illusion is I may look and sound relatively younger, but I'm finishing the end of my septuagenarian decade.
What does that mean? I've never heard that word.
Well, it means I'm in my late 70s.
Got you.
And I'm going to be 80 in a couple years. Yet, my upbringing and my consciousness growing up, I knew I didn't want to age traditionally. It was something inside my head. So I've part of my life, we can talk about it. You know, I've done kind of things to promote longevity. I ain't Superman, and my knees are bad. I can't play tennis anymore. Anyway, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, in the 50s and 60s. Went to Rutgers University. I'm wearing my Rutgers hat, and graduated with a pharmacy degree, 2 pharmacy degrees. I was pushed into that by my mother, who insisted I become a pharmacist. I hated science, and I hated chemistry. I hated everything I was studying. So this was a battle, literally a battle for my 6 years in college. It was a battle to tackle things I didn't like, but I had to do it.
Did you learn from that? Was that worth it? Did you learn from that?
It's a great question. It's a great question because I practiced pharmacy for 12 years. And I did it because I was married as a married kid, and it was a profession, it was a job, it was a good job.
Got to make money, yeah.
Yeah, I got to make money. But there was something inside me. There was this constant battling. I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't happy. A lot of things I didn't know about myself, because back in the 60s, you don't know about yourself. You don't learn about yourself. It just was. It wasn't for me. There were certain creative things, the writing part of my life, that was all stuck inside. Never had a chance to come out. So it was just there. I also grew up in the middle of the Vietnam War.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah. So I'm in college, and I'm in college in 1965, and that was when the Vietnam War was really kicking off. And
was the sentiment that we needed to be there at the time?
Interesting. It wasn't as pronounced. And I just started watching. I don't know if I have it. I just started watching again the Vietnam War by Ken Burns. It's a 10-part documentary. It's the second time I watched it, only because it was such a part of my life. And it still is. It still is. The sentiment, there wasn't as much, like on college campuses. There wasn't as much. It was growing, and as the death count started to rise, and as our commitment to put more troops into Vietnam and draft more young guys, that was growing. So it was beginning to grow. I said to myself, I'm a pacifist anyway. I've never hit anybody, and I get into arguments all the time with people because when I play basketball, I'm 6'5", and when I played basketball, some guys would try to hold me down from jumping, so I kind of elbowed them. So that's not pacifism, but it's what I did on a basketball court. Um, but I was a pacifist, and I had a problem with war. I always have a problem with war. There's got to be better ways. And I said to myself, uh, we're there. It would appear we're there to save face and not to lose a war, and that's why we're there. And listen, Lyndon Johnson bore it out, and Nixon bore it out. He didn't want to be the first president to lose a war. So, and the thing that upset me is we're losing so many lives, and influencing and changing so many lives, young lives. We're doing that, and the sad thing is, 6 months after that war is over, Coca-Cola and McDonald's are going to be in Vietnam selling hamburgers and soda. I said that, and I said, and that's what bothered me intellectually the most about that. The funny thing, the Secretary of Defense at the time, Robert McNamara, wrote a secret paper that was hidden away in his closet, and then some years ago, it was revealed that he wrote to Lyndon Johnson. He was Secretary of Defense. He said, "We'll never be able to win this war. We won't. We will never be able to win this. It's not a winnable war. We're 10,000 miles from home, and it's their country, and we're not going to be able to win that war." So that's, and that was buried away, and that wasn't revealed until some years ago.
A lot of parallels to today, I'm guessing.
You bet. That's a great question you asked, because while I'm watching this, the Vietnam War, and reliving so much of what I lived through and what I thought and felt and still do. As a matter of fact, I drew this. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
I drew this in 1970, and it was an expression of how I felt about Vietnam, and I was also very much into civil rights. I did a lot of things with civil rights. And
the difference between not having a megaphone like social media to really be like, do y'all see what's happening here? You just kind of had to be in your own head and deal with it, and probably be more pacified.
Yeah. It consumed me so much. But you asked a great question, because while I'm watching this 10-part documentary, I'm saying to myself, this is happening today. It's happening in the Ukraine. It's happening in Gaza. It's war. And we as a species can't seem to figure things out. And it's like, I keep saying, when are we going to learn that there are better ways to figure things out than taking the lives
Do
of
you think
civilians?
it's just a resource allocation, world domination kind of mindset?
It's still going on, the world domination. And I don't do politics. In all my work, I refuse to do politics, religion, because it's just a hard concept.
For sure.
But you had mentioned, but I've gravitated in my life to the climate, and we can talk about that.
Yep.
Listen. I went to the first Earth Day, April 22nd, 1970.
Wow,
I was
that's
part
cool.
of, yeah. That was the first Earth Day, and it was an oh wow for me. Wow, this stuff is. Look at the stuff that's going on. 1970, and
Yeah.
as a kid, and interesting. I'm still hugely involved as much as I can be. I formed a climate group. I'm on a New Jersey State what's called One Health. They bring animals, plants, and humans together under one thing because everything depends on each other. And I've interviewed scores of environmentalists and climate people, and it's everything. It's our survival, and we don't get it as a species. Instead of the war stuff, we should be sitting down and figuring out ways to stop climate change, to stop the storms, to stop droughts, and I mean all the whole package. I mean, we and we're running out of time. We don't have a lot of. We're running out of time. So stop making war and sit down together, because there won't be a planet. I mean, that's I feel very strongly about that. And and it's like I'm reliving my '60s. From the 1960s, I'm reliving it again. Uh,
Can you
uh,
can you talk to the interests of just becoming more? I don't want to say like drawn to the issues, but did you have any specific experiences that, besides the Vietnam War, but that enlightened you that you were like, this is my path for sure?
it was 10. I was 10 years old, and this was my beginning to. This was my beginning to understand things about civil rights and equality, and it's been such a part of my life. But I was 10 years old, living in Newark, New Jersey, and I remember this so vividly. Taking a bus. I was 10 years old. I was taking a bus to go to a movie. 11 years old, downtown Newark, and the bus drove through.
Wow, so
Yeah,
young.
really young, and I'm on a bus, and I'm going want to go down to the Branford Theater in Newark. I mean, 10, 11, maybe 12, but I mean, that's what I did. And I was a kid, but when I would come home, I would ask my mother, why do black people live here and white people live here? Only black here and only white here. And my mother couldn't give me much of an answer. And she couldn't, and it bothered me as a little kid. And that was the beginning of my sensitivity and my involvement in any way I could, which still exists today. And listen, I've been so gifted with my feelings that I've had a chance to sit down and talk to John Lewis, the late John Lewis, who's one of my heroes. I mean, and that was a gift. I had a chance. In my first novel, I wrote a passage about Emmett Till, which I wrote 20 years ago. And he's the kid who got killed in 1955 in Mississippi uh, because he said something. He said something to a white woman, and that triggered part of the civil rights movement. And I had a chance to sit down, and I had a chance to give my book to Emmett Till's cousin, the Reverend Wheeler Parker. So I mean, these are full circle things because you're committed to equality and to things, and it becomes part of your life, and then there's a full circle thing. You get rewarded, by the spirits.
And I'm sure it's also an uphill battle. People probably think, oh, you're a white guy. What do you know about these issues? Or,
Yeah,
disingenuously assuming you may not care for the wrong reasons.
right. And I feel and listen. I wrote in my novel. One of my heroes of life is Fannie Lou Hamer. Was a civil rights activist back in the '60s. Just brilliant, amazing, wonderful woman. Most people don't know who she is,
Can,
but
can you talk about her a little bit?
yeah, sure. It's somebody I discovered later in life. I wasn't as aware of the things that she was, I guess, from Mississippi, fighting for equality, fighting for voter registration. This was such a huge thing. But she said one of the great quotes. It's one of my favorite quotes. She said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, talking about racism and segregation and lynching and all these things that were going on, that in some ways still go on. We're still not clear from that. But that was just one of the most amazing quotations. Uh,
That reminds me of a Tupac quote where he's basically saying he doesn't want to be 50 years old celebrating We Are Black history type of events or something. Like, still fighting for their rights all these years later. And it makes a lot of sense,
It
like how long they've
does.
been dealing with it, that they have to see the future so far in advance to say, like, look, if nothing changes, this is what we're going to be at.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, that's brilliant. That's a brilliant quote. We're getting there. We're getting there. Uh, uh, we're getting there. It's just a long, long, long battle. But because of my awareness, because I care, and it's been part of my life, that I'm able to express that stuff. And like I said, in small ways, I get rewarded. So it's just it's my road, and it's the road that I've chosen, and these are things that mean a lot to me. And I guess by getting a chance to meet these amazing people, I mean, I had a chance to do something for one of Dr. King's nieces a few years ago. Yeah, I won't mention names and stuff, but she had a problem, and somehow it came to me, and I was the only one in America who could have solved her problem, and I
Oh,
did. Yeah, and I did. Long story. But I'm so gratified, and I, I don't, and it's funny, Joe. I share this stuff with you now, but I don't really talk about it. It's just who I am. It's just what it's just who I am and what I believe in. Um, it's part of my journey. The stuff that kind of moves me along. I was given my history. Um, so I was telling you, I did the pharmacy. I did the Luxottica eyewear for 25 years, and then one day I watched this movie Casablanca, one of my favorite movies. And at the end of the movie, there was a scene. Bogart shoots the bad guy, and suddenly something came over to me. Um, Something came over to me and filled my head with this called Vichy
whoa.
water. And this came, and this is really wild
You just
because
got an
I never
idea.
wrote anything. I never wrote anything before, and this is I I sat down and outlined it, and I wrote that for five years, and then I published it, and then 13 years ago, I said, I wrote a novel. I think it's time to leave Luxottica and become a writer and a journalist.
What was the name of that one, just for viewers who may just be listening?
Sure, it's called Vichy water, Vichy water. It's actually in the 1940s and when Casablanca takes place. Vichy water was like Perrier. It was a French mineral water.
Got it.
Um,
Okay.
and uh, this then took me on a real heavy duty spiritual journey because I know somebody up there put this into my head in 1 second. I never wrote anything. I studied science in college, and now I'm writing a novel. So when this got published, I retired from Luxottica, and I decided to become a journalist, start writing for a couple of magazines, and I got involved with NJ Discover, a production company here, and we wound up doing specialized kind of news. And I'm now producing and co-hosting a cable TV talk show, which at our peak I brought in Gilbert Gottfried, who a couple of years ago was one of the hottest comedians in the
Yeah,
country.
it's a
He
big
was the
deal.
Affleck. I mean, that's what I was doing, and then I also wanted to give back to students because I was doing okay, and part of my commitment is to give back to students. So I started doing some mentoring at Rutgers and more mentoring. And then 4 years ago, Rutgers University asked me to teach. So at 74, I became a teacher, professor, lecturer, whatever you want to call me, at Rutgers University. Well, most people are retiring.
That
Most
is
people,
so cool.
it's
And
very cool.
I know I really want to stay on that for a second because I'm always talking about asking people their own experiences. How can doing free work lead to opportunities? And you just told me you wanted to volunteer your time to help other people and it led to a better opportunity.
Yes.
Tell me, tell me that's not like
Yeah.
serendipity or how the world should work.
Correct. And there's no game plan.
Yeah.
There's no sitting
Yeah,
down,
no
and
no alternative motives. You weren't going in wanting
no,
that to begin with.
there was no money involved. Everybody's concerned about money. There's never in the last 14 years of my life, there's never been the thing about money. There's no money involved. You're doing things
That are
because you
true
have
to
the
you.
yeah, because you want to do that. So just real innocently, you don't plan these things. I know I started getting involved in my alma mater uh, uh, 25 years ago. Actually, more than that. Uh, uh, I took my son, who was 10, 28 years ago, whatever. He was like 10. I just took him to a football game. This is how it all begins. I'd never been to a Rutgers football game, and he was not an athlete, and I wanted to bond with my son. And if it was a daughter, it would have been a daughter. I wanted to bond, and went to a football game. He loved it, and he said, "Can we do this again?" And so the following year, I got season tickets for everything: women's basketball, men's basketball, football, and that's what we did. And then along the way, just real innocently, as I became a little bit more successful in journalism, I said it might be nice if I gave back the stuff that I'm learning to students. So I went to a networking night at Rutgers, and my gig was communication, media, writing, uh, and it was nice, but it was one of these speed networking things. I got a chance to talk to somebody for 2 minutes. It's not gonna change anything.
Yeah.
For the following year, I volunteered to do a mentoring program, and they put me on a panel. I did a panel, and then they asked if I wanted to mentor a student. So the following year, I mentored a student, all before the COVID, and
I'm
back and forth.
sure that you had to stand out somehow.
Yeah, and it's funny. So I'm mentoring students, and I'm doing these career nights, and it's funny. I was doing a career night, so they had different tables. They had science and financial and uh, sociology, and then my table was communication and media. And just like I'm talking to you, I had like 10, 12 kids sitting there listening to my journey. The same stuff I'm telling you. Um, and the kids were like glued and asking questions, and I'm bonding with a bunch of these Gen Z kids, uh, whom I actually said, when these 10, 12 kids sat down, I said, by the way, just so you know, I'm a half century older than you. You know, and but we're on the same level. We're bonding. I'm relating. They're relating, and communication is good. But anyway, a woman walked by and asked me for my business card. So I gave it to her, and then 4 months later, she called me, and it was the head of a course at Rutgers called Career Explorations, and she asked me if I wanted to teach, because she said, you had the kids in the palm of your hand. They loved listening to you, and it was like, oh wow. I didn't make an instant. I'd never taught before. I mean, I did teach in a major university, and it took
Huge
me.
deal. It's a huge deal.
Yeah. So it was one of the great experiences of my life. And after that, I got more involved in mentoring. I did the teaching. I I did the teaching for 1 semester. They wanted me to continue, and then I had this epiphany. This light bulb went off. That teaching is really hard. It's really hard. It's like 24 hours a day kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
you're probably always trying to think of curriculum, how to better, right? Yeah, I
yeah,
would imagine. I was thinking that.
really hard. And then the kids want to meet you before class. I mean, it was a full time thing. But in the middle of the teaching, I was also doing mentoring, and I was mentoring two students through the road to communication and media at Rutgers. And it's funny, there's like an underground in college, and when kids start talking about, hey, this guy's mentoring me, and I took a couple kids to basketball games and stuff, and football, and they find out that I can communicate and I can talk about pretty much everything except Bitcoin. I don't know that,
That's
and I never
funny.
will. Uh, but the kids. So the underground was the kids started contacting me, emailing me, and stuff, and so at my peak, a year or two before the pandemic, I was mentoring 14 students. So that means I'm driving back and forth to campus 3 times a week, sitting in the diner for 3 hours all day long, mentoring students, and I loved it. And I would never say no to a student if they reached out. that was my thing.
It's
So
pretty cool. Was it one of those things where you weren't gonna realize you loved it so much or appreciated it until after the fact? Like
yep,
you're like, oh, I'm in the moment now. Don't know that it's gonna be missed.
correct. Correct. It was great, and it was diverse. I mean, there's so many different students from so many different countries. I wound up mentoring a student. He was a basketball star for Rutgers, and we had met at a court club meeting and took a picture together, and then I threw that picture of him and me, and we're the same. I'm 6'5", he's 6'5". I threw it up on LinkedIn, and I got 15,000 connections on LinkedIn, and a lot of them are Rutgers. And when I saw the picture, everybody gave it thumbs up, loved it. And then at a basketball game a couple days later, I saw him. He was warming up before a game, and I went over to say hello to him. He came over to me, and I said, that picture we took had 5,000 impressions. He said, wow. He said, can you teach me LinkedIn? And I started mentoring him on how to, work LinkedIn. So it's just hugely rewarding and wonderful. And I continue to mentor students. I just finished mentoring. I worked with this student the whole year. She just turned 20. I mean, so you were talking about 50 plus years, yet we sit and we just chat and talk about everything under the sun. It's great stuff. It really is.
What kind of aspects of like society that you're educating about do you notice haven't changed in those 50 years? Like, what are the commonalities that are not going away? Like, of course, technology is evolving. We talked about Bitcoin, but what do you see like that we share interests no matter the age gap?
Well,
How do you
funny.
relate?
I do relate, and I look to find the areas that you said a great word, Joe. The commonality thing. I talked about my music. I was a folk music guy, so I'm Bob Dylan.
Can you
Uh,
read music?
excuse me?
Can you read music as well?
No, oh no, I
Okay.
just
Just gotta play
and
along.
it's funny, and I think it's the same with every generation. I came out of the '60s, so I was all folk music. Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, some Richie Havens because I liked him. Uh, uh, um, Peter, Paul, and Mary. The pure folk, and the minute the '60s turned into the '70s, and you're getting into hard rock and heavy metal, I was still stuck, and I'm still stuck with folk music. But I try. Listen, Springsteen lives like 2 miles away from me,
Nice.
so I
Everybody got
try.
their favorites though.
Yeah. So, but so in this junior Rutgers junior I was mentoring, we find our common. We talk about music, and she's talking about Taylor Swift. And if my life depended on it, I couldn't tell you one of her songs. Not because
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
give her a chance. So, but when I'm together, we talk about the elements of coming out. She was in a sorority, so I was in a fraternity. So we talked about that, and lo and behold, not much has changed in like sorority fraternity kind of stuff, the interfraternity kind. So we find and we talk. Listen, we talk about AI because I'm hugely interested, and so I can find enough commonality and things to talk about because I try to stay on top. And I don't and again I don't and again part of the bonding is I'm not contentious, so I stay away from politics because in politics you can never win. And
True.
uh,
Politics, religion, all the
can't
same.
win,
Just
and there's no
asking for an
reason.
argument.
There's too many
Yeah.
other things. So we talk about climate. I love talking about movies, and there's another. I love movies. I love film. I love interviewing young filmmakers. I got involved with the Garden State Film Festival, and one of the things I do in my world is I love to interview young filmmakers. Uh, um, and however I can support independent filmmakers, independent writers, authors.
Are there any specific films you'd recommend on maybe civil rights activism.
Well, I watch Mississippi Burning with Gene Hackman. I watch that often. The Eye. This is a documentary, The Eye of the Prize, a wonderful documentary. I mean, I watch those things all the time. Mississippi Burning is the story of the three civil rights workers, Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney, who were murdered by the Klan because they were doing voter registration. Um, it's a little fictionalized, but it's a story of that. It was actually a monumental historic thing in the history of the civil rights movement. These three young kids two from up north and one from there got murdered because they were trying to get voter registration. Um,
Wow, that's I kind of had this question. I don't want to lose it, but it's because you said the voter registration, and it reminded me of it. How how much women had to struggle just for basic things like that, right? Or even opening bank accounts and stuff. And I was talking to my mom about this yesterday. She was talking about how when my own personal life, right? My parents were divorced, but she hesitated because she's very Catholic and the church looks down on it and things like that. And I had the conversation with her. I said, it's not even just that. Like we were talking about how you couldn't leave because as a woman, like all the things that a man had, like we are talking about bank account, things like this. So you had to stay in these trapped marriages and things. And then I said, not only that, but imagine how women were seen in society, right? Like even if you're not quotes a whore, right? Like you might be looked at down, frowned upon just because you are single, even if that's not the case. And like these are just things that I'm noticing. But my point is, have you noticed ways that you feel like women are going backwards? And I'm not talking about like Roe v. Wade for like, you know, the changes in courts, but just other ways in society that you think, wow, we've made monumental changes and now it's not the same anymore. I feel like that about education in a sense, right? Like we don't take as much pride in that the way we used to.
you're right. Another great question, because my growing up, there was civil rights, there was the war in Vietnam, and there was also women's lib. That was, National Organization of Women. Now, all these things were, and that always, it wasn't it wasn't as obvious back then. It was listen, it was buried away, and being, for equal rights all the way across the board. My whole life, these things bothered me, and so when the opportunity presented itself 5 years ago, I got involved with the Women's Health Institute at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, and I'm on the advisory committee. So a lot of the things and the topics that I do a lot of social media for them, but it's an opportunity for me to give back. It's also to learn. So I'm learning about women's health, and as advanced as we think we are, we're not. We still have a long ways to go to make things equal. Uh, um, but are women? You asked, are they taking steps uh, backwards? Uh, I'm not sure. There's always. I know in the area of health, they're behind. They're behind
That
in
one that one really gets me a lot too because I personally never realized the extent of women dealing with shame in like third world countries, maybe because they can't afford tampons, so they can't go to school. Like, who knew that that was an issue?
correct. And I don't even. I'm not looking at other borders, but I mean, I listen. I know in some countries, women can't go to college, women can't drive, and again, I'm not mentioning anything in particular, but outside of America, there's lots of places where women have a long way to go. Have a long way to go. It's better here. I've watched that movie about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The equal justice, and her battling to get women on the same, to be looked at legally as the same as a man. There's no difference, and that took a lot of work. And she did amazing things in that sphere. You never even think about it. I mean, I watch that movie all the time. Uh, about her. It's her life story, her journey. Uh, uh,
One of my questions on creative arts, how can it be utilized to drive social activism, like based on your experience in writing and media production? Especially for me as an artist, I would love to know your perspective on that.
Well, we need more. And that's another great question you asked. We need more. And it's funny. I talk to my son about this all the time. My son's in media. We need more. I'm a little disappointed today in what's coming out of Hollywood. You have blockbusters that deal with not real situations, and the quality. So we need more creative work today, of expressions. I have a dear friend, a really good friend, Keith Armenitis, who's a filmmaker, young filmmaker, and he writes his own stuff and produces, directed. But his is social commentary, what you just said. So one of his great films that he did was called "Be Home Soon," and it's a short film. It's like 7-8 minutes, and it's and it's just a woman uh, um, in her house, and she gets a phone call that her husband is coming home soon, and she runs around preparing, and you can see the fear in her eyes because she's the victim of domestic abuse. Yeah, and so not a word is spoken, Joe, but you just see her uh, uh, getting ready and panicking and putting things away. She ordered something from Amazon, and she didn't want her husband to see it, so she's hiding it. But you could feel the tension and the fear, and you could sense the abuse. So this is the kind of wonderful, and we're not talking about a 2-hour movie here. We're talking about a 7-8 minute movie that is so powerful. So I think there's so much opportunity because there's so much opportunity for creative arts to
Wow,
tell our story, and I see it.
that's
And
pretty good. No, I like that really. And you said, I'm glad that you said how long it was because music videos can easily do that, and
yeah,
artists don't do that through their music anymore. And it doesn't
correct,
even have to be part of the music. It can be before the video, after the video. But I think what you're trying to get at is where's the core message, right?
right. So you don't need great length. It's there. It's
Or
there.
expensive equipment for high production quality. You just need ideas now.
It's funny. I got real friendly. Interesting story. When I started my journalism, there were things that meant something to me. So so this is 13 years ago. I got involved in homelessness. I knew nothing about homelessness other than when I went into New York, and it's like Christmas time, and you go to a movie or something, and you're walking down a side street, and you see a pair of feet sticking out of a box, and you don't see the face, and you don't see the arms, you don't even know what color. It's just a pair of feet in a box, and that person is homeless. I don't even know what gender. Uh, um, uh, 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 Powerful, but I walked by it, and that was my only uh, being a suburban guy, it was my only indoctrination into homelessness. So when I became a journalist, and I had NJ Discover behind me, I said there was there was an encampment about, I don't know, 20, 25 miles from my house where 115 homeless people had been living for up to 12 years. So I went down there with my co-reporter Tara Jean, and here I am, a suburban guy now thrust into the world of homelessness, and learning about it and going back 3 or 4 days in a row. Uh, Point being, I then got friendly. I got friendly with a documentarian who did a documentary. It was called Tent City, and he did a documentary about this homeless encampment. And then he did another. Then he did. I'm looking for my prop. Uh, oh, oh, shoot. Anyway, he did another documentary of a guy living in a vacant lot in a suburban town for several years. The point being, and this is what you said, Joe. The point being, he did this wonderful documentary. I forgot the name. With his cell phone. That was his camera. And he went back, and once a week he went back to interview the homeless guy, and he did it. He went back for like a year back and forth, but he did a wonderful documentary, and I went to the premiere. It was wonderful with
That,
his cell phone camera.
that is pretty cool.
Very cool. I
And
forgot the name.
and it's not like you need to carry around any heavy equipment or anything.
Right.
Yeah, if you remember the name of it later, I'll drop it in the description if you want to
Sure.
send it to me.
Sure, I have to go back and look at it. It's been a bunch of years.
That's a
But
pretty good story, though. I like both of these examples a lot for how we can utilize art.
correct, because art is to express, to tell stories. This stuff is, it's
And another thing I find interesting is that, for all the ways that you can express art, music is one of those where you can say anything. You can literally write about anything. So that's the one where I take so personal because I'm like, you chose to say this. Do you know what I'm trying to get at? Like out of all the words you can pick from, all the things you can stand for, I'm really critical about lyrics in that aspect because you can literally do anything.
yeah, yeah, and I've become such. It's interesting you said that because in watching this the Vietnam War documentary by Ken Burns, they throw songs that were happening, and I put on the subtitle thing, and I'm looking at the lyrics to the song, and it never really hit me before. You listen to a song, you like the melody, you just like the song, but never before have I been so into the words. It's funny. For example, I was listening to, I guess it was Neil Young singing Ohio, about what happened in May 4th, 1970, when the Ohio, you won't remember this, you won't know it, but Ohio National Guard shot 4 students at Kent State because they were protesting the war. They killed 4 students. So it was like the culmination of everything going on college campuses back in the 60s and 1970. And these were innocent kids. Some kids were just walking to class, and they opened up fire. So our military were shooting college kids. And then Neil Young wrote this beautiful song called Ohio. You're talking about that. Uh, um, but it's so interesting you said that, because it was like a slap in the face for me, that pay attention to lyrics, because my goodness, it's such artistry in the way they use words. The words
I
are so amazing.
I was thinking about how my grandfather was in the South Korean War. He was a bombardier brigadier, like working on airplanes and things. And I also didn't realize until recently that how close we were to actually losing that war until America came. And yeah, I didn't know any of that aspect of it. But I'm asking this because he was a very detached person, like from my own dad. And I'm curious how you think maybe war affects generations like that, like long term effects, if you've noticed it in any way.
Um, it's interesting because my father-in-law was in. Am I not hearing you?
Yeah.
Okay, my father-in-law was in World War II. He was in North Africa and Italy, and a veteran, and we never talked about that, and there's no and I maybe part my fault because I never brought it up or never asked him, but we never talked about it, I mean, war is such a horror, and then in my journalism, you know, I did homelessness, I did hunger, I wrote a lot of stuff about hunger in America, another horrible thing that we have that here, and I took courses and learned about hunger, and then I also wanted to honor centenarians, and so I started doing stories on people who had turned 100, and I interviewed this guy Bill, who was on a boat, was on a ship that was bombing Normandy Beach on D-Day, and it's funny when I went to interview him because I knew his son. I was very friendly with his son, Warren. And he said, "You should interview my dad. He's 100 and he fought in Normandy on D-Day." So this was a few years ago. And I went and we talked. And I get along with 19-year-olds and I get along with people who are 100, so I can relate. And so we were talking and he started to open up and tell me stuff. He told me that his ship was a retread from World War One, and so they had smaller guns. And the Army, the Navy, it was the Navy, said, just let the ship just bomb Normandy Beach, and just let it, just leave it alone and let it die there. But they did such a great job shooting their guns that when they were done, instead of scuttling that ship, they took the ship to the Pacific to fight. But anyway, the point being, when it was all over, my friend Warren came over and he says, "Calvin, my dad never talked about World War II before, so you made him open up."
It provoked all these memories, I'm sure.
Yeah, so you made him open up. But there's and it's funny because you're so right on with the things you asked me, because I'm watching the Vietnam War uh, documentary. I'm in the last part. I'll finish it later. But there was one Marine in particular who was so eloquent and so. He was there for a year and saw some the horrors of war. So I actually ordered his book from Amazon. Um, I ordered his book from Amazon, and I want to read it. And I actually want to contact him to tell him how eloquent he is, if he would like to talk about any aspect of it. Um, and in crossing, I didn't go to Vietnam. I didn't go to Vietnam, but maybe it was 10 years ago. The guilt of having not gone, and with nobody to talk to, because I had nobody to talk to about that. So I went to the Vietnam War Memorial here in New Jersey, and it was a cold, cold, cold February day, and the winds must have been 40 miles an hour. And I parked my car, and I went in there, and they looked at me like I was crazy because it's like 0-degree wind chill. And I said, "Where's the memorial?" And they told me where the memorial was. And then I walked around, and they have 366 plaques, and on each plaque, it's each day of the year when men and women died. And I went and I looked at every plaque, and I memorized two names, to the soldiers that I just wanted to remember. I didn't know them, but there is a disconnect with those who lived it, and relating and telling stories. there is a disconnect, and I'm because it was a horrible experience.
Yeah,
And
it's kind of like one of those things where parents are like, I went through this so you don't have to go through it, and they probably don't want to relive it at the same time.
right,
So
right.
that's horrible, though. You lose a lot of history by not sharing, I
A
guess.
lot of history, and some of that stuff is so. It's that's why I love these kind of documentaries that talk about the history that you might lose. And I'm a bit of a I'm a bit of a history buff, so I also watched um, Ken Burns. I love documentaries, to me because it's life, it's real, and I don't want to watch some character climbing up a building and flying into the next building, and
I'm the
that's my
same.
choice. It's
I'm the same. Most people are annoyed because I just want to watch documentaries, though.
Yeah, so you
So,
too. So
yeah.
I watched a great. It was called The Intimate History of the Roosevelts, talking
Wow.
about Theodore, Franklin, and
That sounds
Eleanor.
cool. I would watch
And
that.
yeah, it was great. Theodore was great, but way before my time, and so was Franklin Roosevelt. But uh, I learned something really great from this. Uh, yeah, and it sits with me because I watched it last week actually, and it sits with me because Franklin Roosevelt was one of the most popular presidents ever. He got us out of the Depression, and he got us into the war, and he helped to save the world. Uh, uh, um, but he had a son who flew several hundred missions in World War II. I think the son was Elliot, if I'm not mistaken. Whatever, it's not important. But anyway, when the son came back, they promoted him because he flew like maybe it was 200 or 300 missions, combat missions, unbelievable. So they promoted him when he got back, and the Republicans, and again, I'm not talking politics. As it turns out, it was Republicans. They complained it was favoritism. So, but the point I learned from that was nothing has changed from 1945 to now. Nothing has changed.
Different representatives, same game.
Yes, correct. Nothing has changed. Actually, it made me feel better because I want to think that the way we're so polarized today, it's
That's a good
indigenous.
point. That's a good point. People are thinking it's worse, and it's like, it's not much different.
Same. Nothing has changed.
Red and Circus were more into football than ever.
Yeah, right. Nothing has changed. It was like this great light bulb going off in my head.
on
You know.
on that note, though, do you feel like any president, like specifically, is maybe misunderstood in history?
Um. Great question. Um. Great question. I can't go back into deep history. I'm always fascinated by George Washington and some of the things he did, and what he did. Uh, um, uh, Kennedy was my first president that I could appreciate, because I was 17, 18 years old when Kennedy was around. Um, I could appreciate him, but maybe in some areas he might have been a little bit misunderstood. As I'm learning and watching stuff about him, he didn't have a great handle on civil rights. Um, and
I know this one isn't a president, but I always tell my family, or I remind them, that when I was 15, I saw Ron Paul during running for president. And I just remember him speaking so wildly that I'm looking around in the room like, is anyone else watching him? Like, does anyone care about this? And then that was the first time I understood. I was like, oh, you can be so radical that people just completely disregard you, even if you're telling the truth. You can just be so outlandish that they're like, it would never happen, and just discount you. I didn't realize that as a kid. I was thinking like, whoa, this someone speaking truth to power. It was amazing to me.
yeah, yeah, there are some people who are running. I met some guy a few years ago when I was a journalist who was running for president. I think his first name was Rocky. That Rocky Anderson. I met him and did a little bit of a story, and hey, listen, anybody can run for president. He was just so. Um, uh, but there are. Listen, there are misunderstood. I don't think enough good stuff came out about Lyndon Johnson. He was yes, he was wrapped up in the war, but he was one of the greatest social change presidents we ever had. With the voter rights, the voter rights legislation and poverty legislation. He did a lot of great stuff that got buried away, and he got completely overcome by the war and consumed by the war. It's funny. He decided not to run in 1968. He decided not to run, and it was Nixon versus I don't know, McGovern, Hubert Humphrey. Hubert Humphrey. Yeah, it was Hubert Humphrey. And he gave that speech. He said, "I'm not going to run," because he was just so overcome. But he really did accomplish stuff in social change that he doesn't get enough credit for. But it's funny. He was watching. I guess it was the convention, and there was so much polarization at the '68 Democratic Convention in Chicago, and the riots and all the stuff that was going on, terrible riots. And Johnson, there's a picture I saw it when I was watching the Vietnam thing, and he's lying in bed next to his wife, and his kids are in the room, and he said, I think maybe I'm going to go run again. And so 5 minutes, he said, maybe I'll run again, because if he had run again, he probably would have beat Nixon. But he didn't.
Damn. It's always those people that do the job the best that don't want the power too. I love it.
Yep.
Let's see. How or what human stories have inspired you the most in your interviews, and why?
Good question. That's a really good question. I've done in my own. Well, I've done interviews as a journalist. For 13 years. I've done now the podcast for the last almost 4 years, not quite. I interviewed a professor from Cornell who's been studying food for the last 20 years, how food is changing. We don't think of it, but chocolate, for example, may become extinct, and that would kill me, because chocolate comes from West Africa, and West Africa is having a terrible drought, and that's where most of the chocolate comes from. So we could lose chocolate.
Which is crazy, by the way. Slave chocolate.
Yeah. So and then blueberries. I love blueberries, and they come from Peru, and the blueberries get watered by the melting ice. This is what I learned from this professor, Michael Hoffman. And the water, from the melting ice caps, come down and they water the blueberries. Well, the ice caps are disappearing, so there'll be no more water to water the blueberries. So that's going. Rice changing. Scotch is stored in vats in Scotland, and because of the temperature rising, the Scotch evaporates. So the point being, he really inspired me, because the things we don't think of, he inspired me, and then I interviewed. He was well into his 90s. He was a Holocaust survivor, and I interviewed him, and he told me the story. He told me the story when he was imprisoned by the Germans in concentration camps. he was a big, strong guy, and he actually didn't look Jewish, and he was Jewish. He was working in a mine, and the shovel broke, and the German guard thought he broke it on purpose, so he put a gun to the guy's head and was going to blow him away right then and there. But his hand slipped, and he shot him through the shoulder. And his name was Murray. He was telling me the story. They actually took him to a hospital, and the doctor actually liked him and was healing him. And they didn't give him anesthesia because they didn't do that. But anyway, probably one of the worst Nazi criminals of all time, Dr. Mengele, used to look in on this guy. But then he survived, and then he tells a story that he did the death march. So they had to march like 50 miles to go from one camp to the other. And most of the people died. He didn't. And somebody out of the forest threw him a piece of meat that he lived on, and it helped to keep him alive. And yeah, it's really wild. And he's telling the story, and the tears, and he also tells the story. He was in another camp uh, uh, with Amin Goth. He was the guy from Schindler's List who used to, for target practice, used to shoot inmates at the concentration, just kill them. But this guy used to walk by him every day, and he would wave to him, and he didn't. So, but I listened to him and his story, and where he is now here in America, and his journey, and you get inspired because there's a will to survive, and that is hugely inspirational. Uh, um, so. Those are
50
two.
miles? I'm
Yeah,
sorry, that's insane.
yeah,
Wow. And
yeah,
I'm guessing it was to like literally they call it the death march because they're walking to their death.
yeah. They march them from point A to point B, and I guess it was near the end of the war, and the Germans knew they were losing, and they wanted to hide all the evidence, so they took a lot of people out of one concentration camp, and they were trying to walk them 50 miles, maybe closer to Berlin. I don't know, and most of the people died.
That's
Uh,
interesting, right? Like the thought of trying to cover up something like in a war,
yes,
like the
yes,
country trying to be like, you won't remember this, or
yes.
wow, talk about a collective memory in a sense.
Correct. They tried to cover up all of that stuff. Yeah, they did. Um,
Not to say we're any better, just interesting history fact, right?
yeah, it is interesting. But these kind of things uh, inspire me. That stands out. A lot of climate stuff. I've interviewed a lot of climate people. Inspires me. I've interviewed this great guy, Alan Hesse. He's in Ecuador, and we became friends because we met on LinkedIn, and he's committed. He lives right near the Amazon rainforest, and he's committed to teaching young children about climate change. It's got to start somewhere. So he's written a bunch of graphic novels, graphic comics called Captain Polo, trying to teach children about a polar bear trying to survive in climate change. Again, inspirational, because
Like
these
it.
things aren't money driven. Uh, they're passionate, uh, you know, um, about that kind of stuff.
That's a good
So
one. The children's book, especially. I'm trying to make one myself, and I guess I can talk about it just because I think by the time this comes out, it'll probably be more serious by then. But trying to make a children's book on the world's 100 smartest animals
wow,
because it hasn't been done.
wow. By the
Yeah.
way, that's again, it's so interesting you said that because last week I read, and I didn't read it entirely, but I read an article briefly that animals are much more sentient. They're much more sensitive than we think they are.
Yeah.
Much more. Uh, um,
Birds, too. Birds are a lot on the
yeah,
list. It's quite a few.
just it really is quite a few. And I've had an appreciation for animals for a long time. Actually, it changed my life. Coming out of the first Earth Day in 1970, teaching you stuff about the planet and stuff. In 1975, I realized that cows, they're living creatures. They're living creatures. They have eyes and brains, and now the article I read say they actually have feelings and emotions. But so I
It's
said to myself
funny.
in 1975, uh, uh, I looked at the world and I saw that we water a lot of water. We water the grass, a ton of water that the cows eat. Uh, uh, and part of the cow's droppings goes up and becomes methane, and that kills the atmosphere. And then after we fatten the cows up, McDonald's comes in and make a hamburger out of it. So I said to myself, and I loved hamburgers and hot dogs and corned beef and cabbage and stuff. I said to myself, no more. So I stopped eating anything with four legs in 1975. I'm not perfect. I do eat chicken and turkey and stuff and fish, but I haven't had anything. I haven't had anything with four legs since 1975.
Kudos. That's hard.
Hard, hard. Now it don't make a difference because I tried to eat corned beef a few years ago on my 75th birthday. My son brought me a corned beef sandwich from New York. I took one bite. I figured I'd celebrate, and I spit it out. I didn't like it.
On that note, though, about animals, one of the most fascinating things that I love about all of it is tying in just when you see not commonalities but similarities with how humans and animals interact. Like just a lot of behavior is the same, and then you're like, oh, this is just common throughout nature. It's not a human thing. It's an existing thing. It's a, I don't want to say a law, but yeah, just to find some kind of patterns that we're more similar than we think.
Uh, Great similarity. It's funny. This morning, I was doing my Facebook stuff, and there was a reel popped up about a woman who saved two tigers from being killed, and maybe it had been a year or two, and they were put into like a zoo or something, and she came to the fence. I just saw this morning. That's so funny. She came to the fence, and the two lions saw her, and they came running to the fence, and they jumped up and they started hugging her and kissing her. Wow! I
Yeah.
just watched it this morning. Wow! And they were licking her and kissing her, and she's hugging them. Uh, just it was a wow for me. I mean, I've seen stuff like that before, but uh, 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 and my son and daughter will have a dog, and it's just one of those precious things. It's a living creature, and I always feel good about the fact that I don't eat that stuff, that dog. I don't eat it, and there's a side effect to that. There's a side effect for my not having eaten meat, I believe, in 40 plus years, uh,
Karma.
because I do all these health things. They did a CAT scan. It's called a calcium C2 scan of my heart in the arteries. And a lot of people run into problems when they get to be my age, hardening the arteries, cholesterol, plaque, all that stuff. I had zero.
Nice.
So that means that the blood
Flowing.
is flowing. It's flowing up here, so I can think and perform. It doesn't help my knees, but it helps this thing here, and I'm able to talk to you. Uh,
You are the testament, your own proof of concept.
yes, yes, like a living
Um,
laboratory.
what are the most impactful self improvement strategies you've encountered in your media career?
Um, okay. Well, there are things that I learned and picked up. The self improvement. The self improvement is you pursue everything. Uh, uh, you pursue everything because you want to learn. Uh, um, and I'm trying to put this in. in other words, you take on everything, and you be objective about it. Uh, uh, so I would take on anything that had merit. Uh, the other thing is, do it now, do it right, and that's what I was taught when I worked for Luxottica. Do it now, do it right. So whatever you do take on, do it now. Don't don't waste any time. Don't procrastinate, and do it right. So you do all the proper research. It's like you did. You really impressed me, because when I would be in sales and as a journalist, before I would do a story, still to this day, before I do a story, before I meet anybody, before I'd interview anybody, I would research, and it's really easy today. I mean, you can do AI, you can pop onto Google. So and I got my I got my pages on you. So I so the value is to be diligent and to do the research and to know to spend that extra time. And it actually impresses the people to whom you're interacting with.
Yeah,
Uh,
what's funny about that is my mom as a kid, she was super adamant about doing things right the first time. And now that I'm older, I realize it's because she had to use a typewriter.
uh, yeah,
You
yeah,
couldn't make mistakes and paper wasn't cheap, right? Like she was
correct,
very specific and precise, very
correct,
intentional with every stroke.
correct. Absolutely. And it is doing it now, doing it right, and it is putting in. You know what? It's putting in the time and the energy and the effort to learn as much as you can about whomever you're going to interview. It's kind of it's a value system. Because what you put in is what you're going to get out. And it so helps me perform knowing and that I've done my research. Um, and that's a great value. Do it now, do it right.
How can scientific research be better communicated and integrated with creative art to support social causes?
Well, um, we have something today that's evolving as we speak. Uh, uh, AI, and the minute AI started to really, and that's gonna kind of weave its way into every fabric and thread in our world. AI, and
Hopefully in a positive way.
I hope so. And there will be negatives. It's interesting. I saw the graphic this morning. Um, AI, when grows, as it grows and becomes what it should be, it could be, and will be, has the power to generate money 30 times the size of Amazon. Is what AI, the potential of AI will dwarf even fossil fuels. You're talking about revenue.
Yeah.
So what it can do,
Revolution for sure.
yeah. And jumping back, uh, in the '60s, there was a movie called 2001. I don't know if you know about that.
Was that
Probably
the
not.
Odyssey movie? Okay.
Yeah, yes, a Space Odyssey.
That's yeah. I think Elon was referencing recently that AI is the reason that went wrong, right?
Exactly, exactly. And it's funny. Nobody really talks about that. But the movie came out in the '60s, and it was written by Arthur Clarke, and it was a wonderful movie. Maybe 67, 66, 67. And
Also scary though, because of
very,
life imitating art. It's very
you bet,
scary.
you bet. And that really was the emergence of AI, because near the end of the movie, you had a couple of astronauts, and they told the computer, whose name was Hal, uh, Hal, open up the doors, you know, whatever. And Hal said, "I can't do that." So in other words, the computer was taking over the ship. The computer, his name Hal, was thinking and was taking over the ship and was doing things to preserve itself. So that really was the forerunner of AI as it was expressed in a movie and a book, 2001: Space Odyssey. But yeah, it's such a wow. And of course, nobody appreciates. I look back on it now, and I've said to myself, because I went to see that movie when it came out, and you don't appreciate it. You didn't understand it then, the power, because there were no computers really back then. There really weren't any computers, so to speak. I mean, there were in '69 when we put a man on the moon. There were computers. Um, uh,
Yeah, the way that I'm using AI is really, I get irked and really angry about like societal issues, like whether it's we're talking about homelessness or like the one I'm working on right now is student hunger. Just the stats are astounding. Like I'm just consolidating all this research that you would think is common knowledge, and then I'm going to go put it in front of all the people who can help. But yeah, these are just things that make me mad because it's like these are all basic necessity issues, right? Like that nobody should have to deal with, that are common human qualities we have that we need to survive. So to me, it just feels like no excuse. It's we're not even taking care of ourselves, let alone worried about our planet, trying to help other people. It's just a culmination of so many things we don't care about.
yeah, you're so right. Student hunger is a crisis, and then hunger in general. Here's a great stat for you. When I was studying as a journalist, hunger, learning about it, um, in 1980, I believe there were 45 food pantries in America. Today there are 45,000. Yeah. So,
And
and
people are still hungry.
correct. And the bad thing about quote hunger is your next door neighbor could be hungry. You might be living in suburbia. Your next door neighbor could be hungry and need of food, but they won't come to you because there's a stigma. So you never know. It's called food insecurity. You just, and college kids have it, uh, um, uh, and it's rampant. Food insecurity, and a lot of students have it, but it's rampant.
Yeah. Um, Specifically, are there any historical events that you find most relevant to today's societal issues?
Well, we discussed this before. Um, and it just amazed me, the war in Vietnam and the protests and the Ukraine, and Gaza, and war and civilians and children, that is so powerfully relevant. Uh, um, I take a lot of I take a lot of stuff from movies. Uh, um, The Grapes of Wrath, another movie with Henry Fonda, powerful movie, John Steinbeck. Uh, um, uh, how people, because and again, uh, the 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 climate conditions were so bad that so many people had to uproot themselves from Oklahoma and Nebraska and Iowa, and pick up and go to California because they were dust bowls, and you couldn't find jobs, you couldn't find work, so they had to uproot their lives. And part of that was due to climate, and we have that today. So the Grapes of Wrath, that wonderful movie, a great scene with Henry Fonda and his mother, powerful stuff. Again, I dwell on movies all the time, but that was then 30s, and today we have people uprooting themselves because of climate. Uh, 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 and even more so. And in the future, we're going to see a couple 100 million people have to move away from the oceans, um, and move inland because the oceans are rising.
My,
So there are.
my only real question on climate is: do you feel like there's any of it that's maybe more exaggerated than it needs to be? Because you get where I'm getting at, right? Like people might not believe in it, but let's say it is real. Is there any of it that you do feel is exacerbated or made out to be not as bad as it is?
I don't know because I'm on the other side. I'm on the other side, and I don't think enough. I don't think enough is being done. Maybe I'm wrong. I think we and China and Russia and the rest of the world should get down and really sit and chat. Hey, listen, uh, 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 and there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people out there who swear that this is just a cyclical thing.
Yeah.
It's the way the Earth. We've had ice ages and it heats up in ice ages. Uh, um, uh, but we're getting so many. I mean, we're getting terrible tornadoes now in the Midwest. Terrible tornadoes, and the storms terrible. Hey, we had a plane. We had a plane that was flying from London to Singapore yesterday, and it hit turbulence, and it killed a person and injured 70 people. It's all over the
Oh
news.
yeah. I did hear about that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so they were flying at 35,000 feet, and then suddenly the turbulence dropped them down. It dropped them down like 5,000 to 6,000 feet, and the people who weren't seat belted went flying all over the place, and one guy died from a heart attack. The point
God,
being, the point being, Joe, is they hit turbulence, and you can't see turbulence on radar. The only way a pilot knows there's turbulence is another pilot tells them, "Hey, we have turbulence." So it was terrible, terrible, and we're getting more turbulence today because of climate change, because the Earth is heating up, it's warmer, and the winds are changing. So these are subtle things. A month ago, I read an article that for the first time ever, they found traces of plastic in a mother's breast milk. So we dump tons of plastic in the ocean, and the fish and the plastics again get reduced and broken
nobody's
up,
doing it.
and the fish eat it, and then we eat the fish, and it's in breast milk. And these are subtleties. These are this, but they're there, and it's happening. So it's a great debate. Either we're not doing enough, or we're doing too much. A lot of people say we're doing too. We're not. Things are. You got to look. I'm in Jersey, and we got 9 million people living on top of one another. And you want to jump on the turnpike or the parkway, and it's bumper to bumper traffic. And I say this all the time. And all that exhaust. And I'm saying to myself, look at all these cars here, and all that exhaust is going right up there.
It's like defecating in your own home in a sense,
Yeah,
just on the floor of your house.
yeah, and then I said, well, that's just this little tiny little state in New Jersey. You're talking about the whole world every day. We're
Yeah.
spitting that stuff up there. It ain't good. It ain't good. It's funny.
I guess, yeah,
I
you can agree that we're poisoning the planet for sure.
We are. You know what? We are. And again, I'm no great intellect, but I see a subtlety in climate reporting now, in climate emphasis. For the last 10 years, everything has been trying to keep global warming at 1.5 degree rise, so that we wouldn't have such dramatic effects. So everything is, every president, everybody's trying to keep the Earth from heating up not more than 1.5 degrees. But now I see a little bit of a subtlety change. It's not on the news. The subtle change is We're not worried about heating the Earth up 1.5 because that ain't going to happen. It's going to go more than 1.5. So we know we can't stop it. Now we have to find a way to live with it. So when the Earth, so it's called sustainability. So when the Earth heats up to 2 degrees and the ocean rises, and ice caps and icebergs, everything is melting and the ocean is rising. So we got to find a way to live now in 30 years with maybe 200 million people moving inland. Um,
But all that insurance and the flooding is just going to make money anyway, so there's no incentive to fix it. Am I right?
right. And by the way, that's the essence of the essence of us, the species, is greed.
Yes,
Uh,
it's pretty
uh,
sad, and I mean that's actually really the theme of the show. If you haven't caught that one yet,
it's greed.
yeah.
Bottom line, the bottom line. Hey, everybody deserves to make money. Corporations make money. All this. Oh, sure, sure. All this. All it's greed. And I listen. I don't. Everybody should make a profit. Everybody should make money. But somebody's got to be thinking. Somebody's got to be thinking of kids and grandkids. Fossil fuel companies. Hey, everybody's entitled, and I don't have a problem with that. But somewhere along the line, we're doing a handoff. We're doing. I'm Aaron Rodgers, and I'm the quarterback for the Jets, and I'm going to hand the ball off. Uh, um, and it's a handoff. We're handing it off to, Gen Zs and young and millennials. It's their world, but the greed thing has to be addressed. Somebody has to step up. So, it's funny. I didn't show this, but this is my second novel. There's a tortoise in my hair, and I actually think I wrote one of my greatest lines that I ever wrote in here, and I'm so proud of it. I have a character in There's a Tortoise in My Hair, A Journey to Spirit. I have a character who's the last. He's the last person. He's the last person left on Earth. And there's a gigantic tidal wave coming to wash him away. He's the last person left on Earth, and he yells before the tidal wave kills him, "I still don't believe in climate change." I thought that was great. And it says it all. It says it all. You could be the last person. You're,
It's like what it's also like is it's like putting a plastic bag over our head because we're suffocating ourselves from the microplastics.
yeah, yeah.
We're doing it to ourselves. I agree.
We are. And honestly, I don't, I don't know how we can undo. I don't know how we can. Listen. I can't even imagine a world where I can't hop into my car and drive out and pick up some chicken sandwich at fast food. How can I not do that? So I don't know how we can. Maybe China's going to make 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 10 million electric cars. That'll help. I mean, it'll help. We just need stuff. We just need stuff quicker.
No, it's so crazy because it's not like we have enough cars for every person on the planet. So it's kind of funny. You still can't please everyone.
Correct.
What expert opinions have most influenced your approach to journalism and social change?
I gotta digest that. Um,
Even any authors maybe that come to mind?
well, yeah, I think of Jane Goodall. Um, um, I think of Rachel Carson, who wrote A Silent Spring way back. These people predicting these um, rich. I mean, these are older. These are older. Jane Goodall spent time with gorillas, and I think it was gorillas. Uh, uh, I don't think there's enough. And there's been 1 million different journalists who tackle that. and hey, listen, in film also the China Syndrome. I mean, that it's not necessarily, but it's part of that influenced me. I mean, that movie influenced me tremendously. Um, this Michael Hoffman, who wrote this book, The Changing Menu, influenced me because I never dreamed, I never dreamed, I never even computed that we've got so many problems with food that we just take for granted. So these are things that
Any specific cultures or maybe spiritual beliefs as well? Anything
uh,
inspires you?
well, um, you you said a loaded you said a loaded question.
Yeah.
The spiritual stuff. I wrote this. I wrote this. There's a tortoise in my hair because I was directed to write it, and it got a Kirkus star, which is the highest honor you can get from Kirkus Reviews. Uh, uh, because so much of my life is a spiritual journey, and you don't know this stuff is happening until it's happening, and you kind of like put things together and try to figure things out. And I've had such an amazing spiritual journey, and some of it's tied into Catholic teaching. Number 444, angelic intervention. Um, but to culminate the writing of the book and so forth, I actually had a session 3 weeks ago to try to want to learn and understand. I had a session with a spiritual healer and a clairvoyant, and it was set up by my friend Grace Agnew, who's a climate. Uh, she's a climate activist.
Was it legit? Like, did you feel this person
Oh
knew their
yeah,
stuff?
yeah. I'm going to tell
Wow.
you about this. This is great. So Grace contacted me and told me her niece left a great job. Her name is Ravel Lorette. She's down in Texas, and she just got into this. She started doing this stuff, and would I be interested? I said, yeah, I really would be, because I'm really into all this spiritual stuff because it happens to me, and there's no explanations, although I'm beginning to understand. But anyway, we zoomed, we got acquainted, we found some great commonality between her and I, and following week she did a session with me, and and for the 60, 70 minutes, her eyes are closed, and I'm sitting here and I'm taking notes on the things she's saying. But anyway, point being, she nailed me, and she nailed me, and I'm intelligent enough to know that she didn't use glittering generalities and words. She didn't say that, oh, you're gonna have a lousy day next week. Well, everybody has a lousy day next week. I mean, there's nothing. You don't need some clairvoyant to tell you that. But she delved into the deepest parts of me that not even my wife knew. Yeah, and she told me. Yeah, she told me amazing things. So, in other words, it ain't made up, and there's no way you can go on Google and see any of this stuff. But it's what she saw and what she felt. But she told me I'm 1,200 years old. My soul is 1,200 years old, so it's been around and it keeps coming back. And she told me, and that was a great feeling because it kind of elevated me and made me feel good. That I'm old, and I keep coming back. I'm allowed to come back. But the other stuff about my growing up, some deep stuff that still sits with me. She told me, and I actually threw that. I took a 5-minute segment of what she did for me. Again, Ravel Lorette, um, uh, uh, and I'm going to continue to do these things with her because it's really fascinating. But to me, that was a spiritual highlight of the last 12 years of this journey that I've been on. In 1974, here's a spiritual thing. In 1974, I was a pharmacist, and I'm driving home, and I was kind of crazy. The war was winding down in Vietnam, but I was still kind of crazy. I had a Volkswagen, and I was at it's late August, and it's about 8 o'clock at night, and I'm in the right lane, and the guy pulls up to me in the left, and he gives me the finger. Um, and again, I was a young kid, and I peeled out, he peeled out, and we were drag racing.
I knew it. Why did I know you were gonna say that? All right, beginning with your transitional story into this
Yes.
great
So here's
spiritual thing.
my transitional story into spirituality. So it's 1974. I'm drag racing. I'm in a Volkswagen. I'm drag racing with this guy, 8 o'clock at night, and I have a Volkswagen, and we go from 25 in the city, and we hit about 50, 55 miles an hour, and we're going fast. And then, but it was getting dark, so the road curved. The road curved to the left. I didn't see it. He didn't see it. So he hit me. And my reflex action was I at 60, 55, 60 miles an hour, I swung my steering wheel so fast that the Volkswagen has a low center of gravity, so it then started to roll over
Oh man,
6 and 7 times. I mean, it's just rolling over.
just
So as it started to roll over, and there are no seatbelts in
oh
1974,
my god.
so it's rolling over, and I said a prayer. I said, "Dear God, I know you're
Is
going
it
to
slow
take me."
motion? Like, what is it? Take me through it. Are you like tumbling in slow mo?
So I'm tumbling, and of course I'm petrified, and you don't remember everything, and I'm petrified, and uh, I closed my eyes, and I said, "Dear God, take me, but do me a favor, don't rip an arm or a leg off." And I just waited, and then there was a thump, and I opened up my eyes, and the car was upside down and crushed, so there wasn't much left of the car. The door was over my head, and I opened my eyes, and I knew I was alive, and I knew that the car was starting to smoke and stuff, so I had to get out of there. And
What?
uh,
What?
it
Get
was
out of
scary.
there.
And and
What?
uh, and I climbed out, and I landed on somebody's
Oh my god.
lawn, and there wasn't a scratch on me,
What?
not a scratch, nothing. And I walked over. I was dazed, obviously, and I walked over and I sat on some steps, and people saw the accident, came running over. They were looking in the car and they were yelling, "Where's the person? Is he dead?" And I'm saying, "It's me. Here I am." And then the police came and
What?
ambulances came, and I sent the ambulances home. I said, I'm okay. And then the cop, asked me what happened, and I lied. Of course, I said some guy hit me. I didn't say I was drag racing. Um, and then he said, I want to show you something. And I went with him, and he said, your car went between a big tree and a big telephone pole. And if your car 6 inches either way had hit the tree or the pole, you'd be crushed to death. You definitely wouldn't be here. And
Whoa.
then he said, but then he said something really interesting. It would appear that your car is wider than the distance between the tree and the pole. So we don't know how you got through there.
You
Uh,
like some weird narrow slender spin or something? Just
it
like
uh,
you were
so
you weren't
that
horizontal when you went through, basically, it sounds like.
I've no I have no. I mean, the car was crushed. There was nothing left of it and stuff.
Basically you flipped in every perfect way that you could.
Yeah, yeah. So somebody up there, kind of helped me out. Um,
You have no
uh,
scratch though? What
Nothing.
okay, what car model is this? Are we
It
gonna
was Volkswagen.
advertise? Are you doing a commercial soon for them?
I should. It was a VW, and again, it's a 1973, 1974 Volkswagen.
Wow, they're gonna
Yeah,
revive the model after the story. I love it. That was
it
good.
it was really good. So that was a spiritual. I wasn't quite aware that there was some spiritual involvement. Uh, I
Do you think
wasn't.
Do you think the world was trying to wake you up and let you know that it existed? Like maybe you weren't spiritual before that?
Well, I just filed that in my back pocket and didn't realize until some years ago when all this spiritual stuff that's in my life now started to happen that
Do
I
you have
realized,
any other experiences like this?
yeah, sure. Um, uh, in 19, I'm sorry, in 2016, my wife, my sister-in-law, and cousin, we went to the Middle East. We went to Israel. Um, and my knee was so bad at the time. I was walking with a cane. I couldn't walk, and I needed to get a new knee. Uh, and so the pain was bad, and I couldn't walk. So I wanted to cancel the trip, and they begged me, not to, because you do this once in a lifetime. So I said, I'll go. I'm not happy about going because I can't walk. I'm in pain, and I have a cane. But here's the deal: if we're going for 12 days, I want 2 days for myself to do what I want to do. And they said, sure, fine. So uh, the first or second day there, I actually climbed. I got permission to climb on top of a Muslim school, um, and it was close to the Temple Mount, and I wanted to see that very holy spot and take some pictures because it's a very holy spot, and reverent and poignant and stuff. So I took pictures, and then after that, um, I wanted to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and that's really holy because when and it was just me and my sister went. You walk in and you look on your right on the second floor there. It's where Jesus was crucified. It was the hill that's now part of the church, and then you go further in, and this particular day they're doing some remodeling, and they were letting two people at a time crawl through a little tunnel to get inside uh, this place where Christ's casket is, where he was buried, and where he was resurrected. So there's a great picture of me sitting holding my cane, waiting to walk, waiting to crawl into that. Um, it's a
How
great.
was it? Were you like in
Well,
pain getting
I
through it?
crawled in, and I can't, and I'm pretty good with words. It's hard to find words. Here I am, my hands are on Christ's casket, and I'm meditating and thinking and stuff, and personal stuff, um, and after a couple minutes, I go out, crawl out, and they hand me my cane. It was hard to describe where I am because not that many people get a chance to do that, and I was doing it. Um, uh, and then the next day, I wanted to do this other thing. I wanted to go to Nazareth to Joseph's church and to Mary's church, the Church of the Annunciation. And when we were doing that stuff, nobody was with me because I walked too slow with a cane. So they all did their thing. I did my thing. Went to Joseph Church. Went to Mary's Church. The bottom floor of Mary's Church, there's a shrine to Mary. So I do a little meditation, and I'm walking up with a cane and by myself. I'm in the basement, and I feel a strange thing go up and down my legs. It's kind of strange. And then I walked out, and there was a side door, and I took one step to go out of the side door, and I feel this strange pain go up and down my leg, and the pain was gone, and everything was gone, and I was healed.
What?
Yeah. So I yelled, "Oh my God!" And my wife and my sister-in-law, everybody came running back. What happened? I said, "I'm healed." So I was healed. I didn't need to
Wow.
get a new knee.
That's so
I couldn't.
cool.
It was very cool. And I came back. I came back here. I went to my orthopedist, who's been treating me for a couple of years. So I said, "What happened?" He said, "I don't know. I don't know what happened." So that, yeah,
Make you a believer real quick.
yeah, yeah.
What do you
Uh,
think it was though?
it's just spirit. It's spirit.
Do you think
Uh,
it had to do with where you were, like the location, like the resonant with the area, maybe?
Well, because things have happened in my life, um, because things happen in my life, I attribute it to things. Yeah, listen, yeah, there are things that happen that we just don't know about. We don't know about. It's beyond our realm. It's beyond our grasp. It's beyond our explanation. And so it falls under this wonderful thing called spirit. And so I've had angelic intervention. I'll tell you another one. I hope I have a picture. You want to see one more little really wild thing?
For sure, of
One,
course.
one more wild thing. So what changed my life around is I wrote this book, and when I wrote this book, uh, and over the years as I'm writing it, I know somebody up there stuck this into my head because I never wrote anything before, and this became a vehicle for me to change my life, become a journalist. That's why I'm talking to you now. Uh, um, and I went on a 7, 8, 9, 10 year journey to figure out, you know, how this got put into my head. And one night, uh, I was about a year away from finishing a novel. The cover came into my head, and it's this bottle of Vichy water. It kind of looks like this. And I jumped up. It was 4:44 in the morning. I jumped up. I came down here and I drew a picture of what I wanted the cover to be. So it's a bottle of Vichy water, and my two characters are sitting on a bench on a train station. And it was kind of amazing, that I had this vision in my head. It was amazing, and I always wondered where that whole image came from. Anyway, 10 years go by, and finally, after a 10-year search, I finally figure out who put this into my head. Uh, and I find out it's my grandfather, who I never met. He died in 1937, and I never met him. And uh, he came over here from Russia in 1900. But anyway, the day I found out it was him, long story. I can't even get into it. But the day I found out it was him, I panicked because my mom and dad were gone, and I didn't know if they even had a picture of my grandfather. So I looked and I found one picture of my grandfather, and he's the spirit who put this, into my head, everything. Uh, and here's the one picture I found of him. He's That's him there. But you see what's in that on that table? That bottle of water.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Did,
1902 in Newark, New Jersey, and there's that bottle of water.
I wonder, do you think it was just the impression of the shape that he was making on you?
I don't know, you
Because
know.
I'm curious how spirit would try to connect, is all. Like sending
Well,
impress
uh,
shapes or
it's so
images.
mysterious. It's so mysterious. I mean, it, it's it's beyond our realm to understand, but I mean, it was haunting. It's haunting because all of this was put into my head. This whole novel was in my head in 1 second when I watched that movie and I saw a scene, and I grabbed my head. So, and this made this image of the bottle for the cover that was in my head in 1 second at 4:44 in the morning. So, uh, and then when I find that one picture of him, with that bottle of water, uh, it these things are not explainable. They're wonderful things, and
Speaking of things that aren't explained, did you have any maybe otherworldly, other sensory abilities growing up or anything? Like you talked about clairvoyance earlier. Did you ever have any
no,
interest in the psi?
no. The only thing I did as a kid, I would sit, on my
Bending spoons.
yeah. Oh, I remember that guy. There was a guy who used to bend
Yuri
spoon.
Geller. Yeah,
Gary
Yuri
Geller.
Geller.
Yeah. Uh, Hey, no, no, no. Um, no, I never had anything. The only thing I would look at is I would sit on my porch in Newark, and it was dark in the summer night, and I'd stare at the stars in wonder, because there's so much out there that we don't understand and never will understand. Um, but like I said, the last 10 years, the things that have happened, they are inexplicable, and I would go to spiritualists. I'd go to anybody to help uh, explain things. One of the most uh, another amazing story that there are no explanations, and that also helped to change the way I think about the world. I was writing before my first novel. I started to write another novel, and I was looking for a perfect name for a character. He's an Italian lawyer who lives in Newark and is going to go down to Washington, and I just couldn't come up with that perfect name. I sat here for like an hour trying to come up with a perfect name, and I couldn't. So I went to bed. The next morning, I was selling eyeglasses, and I got up and I drove 45 minutes to my first appointment. Um, and as I'm driving to my first appointment, out of the clear, random blue universe, a name for my character comes into my head, and it was Louis Del Priore. Now, I don't know where it came from, and I said, "Oh wow, what a great name!" It's like perfect. And I work for an Italian company, and I knew a million Italians, and I never heard that name Del Priore before, but it was a perfect name because when he goes to Washington, he becomes Louis Delpy. I mean, the whole thing is great. Anyway, I go to work, and 8 hours later, I'm selling eyeglasses, and I'm driving home. I'm driving home on a highway, and something. It was around 4:30 in the afternoon. Something makes me want to go in to visit this optometrist. And it's 4:30, and in the business, you don't mess around with people after 4:30. They want to go home. But something made me park my car, go in, and when I went in, the receptionist waved at me and said, doctor, be right out if you want to wait to see him. I said, yeah, I just want to say hello. And I sat there, and it was around 4:44 in the afternoon, 4:44, when came in. Um, a patient came in to get eyeglasses, and then the doctor came out. And he said, I'm glad you're here, Calvin. You can write me up an order for 40 Brooks Brothers frames. I said, that's great. And a patient came in to pick up contact lenses, and the receptionist asked him his name, and he said, Louis Del Priore. The name,
That's so
I
random. Like, what are
really,
the odds of that? What?
really, really random. And I mean, I flipped out because, 8 hours earlier, that name just popped into my head. And here I am meeting that person 8 hours later. Really random. And I asked the guy, I told him I'm writing a book and blah, blah. And I asked him about the name, and he said, I come from Brooklyn, and it's a rare name. There's only like 2 Del Priores in Brooklyn. So that kicked off in me that something was happening in my life.
Would
Uh,
you consider that a synchronicity?
yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I consider it a synchronicity. I consider it a major spiritual. It's beyond, and nobody can tell me that it just happened. That no,
Yeah.
no, that was a plant. It was a plant, and it was a directional. It was a directional change. So
So, what do you have to say to people who believe coincidence over maybe
hey,
destiny?
believe it. You can call it a coincidence. You absolutely call it a coincidence. But my life is so filled with this kind of stuff. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means, and I may never know what it means. But the people who know me know that my life has been wondrously filled with these kind of stories, these kind of interventions. Um,
Are
uh,
you a meditator?
A little bit, not actively. No, not no. I don't do the breathing or I don't do any of that. I do sit and think, and I do reach out to spirits, um, and talk to spirits, and especially these last couple of years, as I've been given this gift. It's a gift. We all have it, you know. Every one of us have it. I'm not any more special than anybody else.
It
It's
sounds
just,
so taboo to talk about. Like I have questions about it, but it's so taboo.
yeah, it's personal. It's
Yeah.
personal. And listen, people who know me, you know, and I always tell these wonderful stories. They're wonderful stories, and they're true. Um, they're true, and there are no
Is
experts.
there an advantage to the communication?
Yeah, there is an advantage because I'm very comfortable. Um, I'm very comfortable because I don't feel alone. You know, I don't feel alone.
You
Uh,
know, one you talked about greed earlier, and I feel like one of those commonalities we always hear about is people don't ever offer anything to the spirit.
um, well, what I offer to my spirit is I talk to my spirit uh, many times a day, uh, uh, and it's and I want to give back, and I want to make that spirit proud of me. So it helps me pursue things that have merit and that give back. And I'm constantly telling my spirit, my grandfather, that you're spending a lot of time with me, you're doing all this stuff. I want to make you proud, and so the things that I do, I just want to make you proud. If that makes sense.
Yeah. How can local media projects be scaled to have a global impact?
Uh, well, it, I look at Greta Thunberg. I look at Greta Thunberg, who was a young kid, young girl,
Getting arrested all the time.
yeah, in Sweden,
Yeah.
and it began her speaking out, and that's about as local as you can get. This is local. She was speaking out. She was a young girl and upset about the environment, and that eventually started a little bit of a movement. It eventually got her to the UN. It got her to the UN, where she spoke to the UN. So that's local. It's absolutely local, local expression, local media. And listen, we live in interesting times because we have the power of the internet and social media to express and to voice. So like never before. Uh, I mean, I had a guy do a press release. Uh, he did a press release for me, and he put it on 429 financial things about my book, and that was an audience of 42 million pair of eyes. So that's the power that we have. So that's local stuff. I'm a local author, and I'm trying to reach out on a global thing. So we have that, and a lot. And listen, a lot of it is luck. It's like buying a Mega Millions lottery ticket. It's 1 in 309 million to win. And maybe if I throw something up on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, maybe it'll catch the right pair of eyes. Maybe it'll catch Oprah. And you see, I wrote a book. You know,
Yeah, we talked about leadership earlier, so I'm curious what role does leadership play in driving collective success when we're talking about media production and social advocacy?
well, leadership's a funny thing. Some because a person needs to step up. A person needs to step up and want to be a leader and want to assume and take charge. And most of us don't do that because most of us, there's four kinds of people in the world: amiable, expressive, driver, and analytical. And the overwhelming majority of people are amiable. They just want to be liked, and they want to join, the in crowd. And so, and again, I don't know percentages, but most people are amiable. They just want to be liked and part of the gang. So, a leader. I'm not necessarily a leader, but I never was, and I didn't run for office. But all of a sudden, you find that you can do these things. So leadership is, I think it's growth, it's caring, it's caring about a cause. It's being, I care about climate, so I helped to get some people together, and we formed a little climate group, and they used to meet every couple of months, on Zoom and talk about issues of climate. So it's leadership. Somebody has to step up and assume, and they have to be driven. And I'm not motivated by money. I'm just motivated by accomplishments, and I'm motivated by saving. Yes.
Just to speak to that point, though, even more so, can you talk about how you feel about creatives nowadays, like being more important to be leaders more than ever, or maybe more so introverts that don't want to get in front of a camera or don't want to take the lead?
We collectively need leaders. We collectively need leaders. Um, uh, I think there's a great vacuum here. Um, uh, we need more leaders, more committed people, leaders that are dedicated to principles and saving the planet, and saving people, um, uh, not motivated. There's always power and money and all kinds of stuff, but there's this tremendous vacuum uh, in leadership. Um, uh, uh, and sometimes it sometimes it's getting involved. It's putting yourself out there, getting involved in different things. And as the call comes up and arises, you're in. Maybe you become chairman of a committee, and it's just I just think it's an evolution. You begin to discover things about yourself that I can do this, I can do that, maybe I can do this, and you get involved and you contribute, and
The the other thing I notice is, like, me personally, I notice, like, it's a great feeling whenever my own friends and I'm working with them and we're accomplishing and getting things done. But I don't necessarily like the feeling of telling people what to do. Like, that's the uncomfortable part. But at the same time, somebody has to, like, make the plan, the schedule. What are we doing? Or else things will never get done, right? So it's an interesting dilemma that the people
it's a
who really,
dilemma.
yeah, the people who don't want to do it, aren't interested in it, are the ones we really do need the most.
It's finding somebody that if you somebody who can inspire, somebody who can, hey, do that, I'll do this. Leadership is by example. So if you're involved in something, you start doing all kinds of things, and you're setting an example, and people are seeing that you're doing this, and so I say, hey, well, you do that, you do this, I'll do this. So it's sharing, it's feeling, it's being involved, having the empathy, the whole. I mean, um, I never really thought about leadership. I was in that way. Would I have wanted to be, a class president? No. No. Uh, would I have wanted to run for political office? No, not for me. But there's leaders. I'm involved in some environmental commission here in town and stuff. But I think, listen, to have leadership qualities is a gift, and to be able to take that and to produce and to have good reasons, why you're doing that. I mean, it's great stuff. We just need more of these. We need more
Just
leaders.
Just a few more questions here.
Sure.
What are the biggest challenges you faced in aligning personal fulfillment with your professional media goals?
Um, well, um, the personal, the, my, the personal challenges was overcoming rejection. Tough, tough thing. That was always a challenge because I believe I have a great story. I believe I have this. I believe I have that. And trying to get so it's never to take rejection and have that suppress you. And we're not necessarily creatures to deal with rejection. Rejection can manifest itself in a lot of negative ways and counterproductive ways. But one of the biggest things I had to deal with, and then my whole media thing is dealing with rejection. Approaching cable TV, a cable TV station in a particular town, saying I'd like to, if you want to pick up my show, and dealing with that, and trying to get people to sponsor you hard, trying to make a sale hard, hard. And I was a salesman for 25 years, and I was pretty good at it. Hard. So it's one of the biggest things. It's prioritizing. It's packaging rejection, and putting it into a class as a learning experience.
That's a good idea. I like
And
that.
it's all
Monetize
learning.
on your experiences, right? Even the bad ones. That's what you're getting at.
Yep, yep, and
There's
and
something to learn. Something to learn and something that somebody else can gain from it.
correct. So every rejection that I've gotten, and well, it's part of learning. It'll make me better. I won't make the same mistakes. Um, there's a great story. It's a wonderful story. It's a true story. There was some guy who worked for a major company. He worked for a major company, and he was given a project, and he did the project, and it backfired. And the following morning, the company lost $50 million because of what this guy did. So he was called into the CEO's office, waiting to be fired because he cost this company $50 million. And he went in, and the CEO said, I guess you think we're going to fire you. And he said, yeah, I expect it. He says, no, we're not going to fire you. We just spent $50 million to teach you a lesson. Isn't that great?
Oh my god!
It's great.
Wow, need more of those.
Yeah. So it's learning from, it's
Yeah, not just getting rid of people and punishing them either when they make a
right.
mistake, right?
Correct. So they spent $50 million. The guy ain't going to do it again. And so he wasn't fired. He wasn't promoted, but he wasn't fired because they spent $50 million teaching him a lesson. It's a great, great story. One of my favorite stories.
Yeah, you also just made me think even more so from my own personal experiences how to try to talk about the losses more so, right? Because even when we're talking about these stories and the questions I'm asking you right now, a lot of it is like the turmoil, like that's the compelling parts of our lives.
Yeah.
We never document that. Like we never want to talk about what's going bad in our days, but it's a good observation. Um, how can history inform our approach to future media projects and societal challenges?
Well, there was a great, um, he was a great historian, Georges Santayana, who said, he who forgets history is condemned to relive it. So, and it's been reworded a million times. So history, if you do learn from history, and you let history teach you, then and if you're aware, then you hopefully won't make that same mistake. Um, you have to be
Yeah,
aware and be a
yeah.
student, and have everything everything laid out in front of you to analyze and study. And history can teach you. Um, I think about that all the time.
Yeah,
If
especially the greed aspect. It keeps coming back to that, right? It's
it's
like
all,
it's our worst inherited gene. If we could just get over it, we'd probably have a utopian world, quite honestly. If
yeah.
you think about like free energy and what our struggles are, things like that.
The greed thing. Chat GPT, the head of Chat GPT,
Sam
his name,
Altman.
yeah, Sam Altman. So as the story goes, he's a great visionary. He's brilliant. He's this. He's that. So he got fired, and when he got fired, well, he got fired because there was two roads to take with one to make money, greed,
Yeah.
and the other to do it for the common good. So he got fired because he wanted to take it down the road to make money. And he got fired. And the next day, I don't know, 300 executives from ChatGPT
Yeah.
quit. And so he got rehired a day later, and the people who fired him, they got all fired. And so, uh, uh, you know, it, it,
Crazy.
it's crazy. It's a balance. It's 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 a balance between doing good and paying for the doing good. It's a tough call, but greed is it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing.
Yeah, I would definitely argue it's the root of all our problems. How
Correct.
can how can resilience be built and maintained within media communities and teams? I'm also curious on your thoughts on mainstream media in that aspect.
Uh, well,
Being replaced.
it, it, we're in such a time of change. So that question is riddled with holes. I certainly, and I don't think anybody has a handle on how it's changing. I know that my son years ago cut the cord, no cable, no cable. He'll get his news, online, and I couldn't process how my son, wouldn't listen to NBC or ABC or CBS or CNN. How could you not? Have
Yeah,
that stuff going 12 hours a day. How could you not have that?
that's my
Um,
dad for sure. Yeah,
yeah. I don't think anybody really has a handle now, on media and how it's changing. I just read something the other day. Oh, I read the other day. Late night talk shows dramatically their audiences. Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, Seth Meyers. I mean, they're great stuff. I always watch bits and pieces and stuff, and but their audiences are down dramatically because people are getting their stuff
yeah.
somewhere else. So I can't answer that question because it's changing. Streaming, streaming, it's just so dramatically changing and merging and
And
all
I'm
of
also curious about your perspective on our appreciation for maybe timeless things. Like had a podcast with one of my lifelong friends who was trying to explain how TikTok has made us consume such short length content that our appreciation for those long shows like operas or Broadways, like they can't sit through those types of things. Can you
correct.
imagine what the next generation was going to be like?
Scary,
Yeah.
scary, scary, scary. And
But
I,
this is the backbone of society and culture, you know.
uh, you and I, we put out products that are lengthy, and I put out products that are. It's funny. My son, who's a media guy, he's a media guy, and when I started my podcast, he said, don't go over 10 minutes because nobody's gonna don't go over 10 minutes. So for the first three months, I did 7 8 minute interviews, and then I was interviewing somebody brilliant. We were talking about aging, longevity, and stuff. And I said, well, we can't do this in 7 minutes. Just talk. So we talked for like 45 minutes, and I said, what I have to do. Just talk an hour, however. Uh, uh, um, and I look at statistics, and people don't watch for the most part all 45 minutes, and they'll take what they want out of it. It's very disconcerting, because the content of what you're putting out is great stuff, and if people would delve and listen and watch, and it's great stuff. Interesting people, I have interesting people. You have interesting people. There's so much there. Uh, uh, um, it's very. I don't know where. I mean, I don't know where all that. I don't know where it's going, and I don't know how to. I don't know. It's
Yeah, what
scary.
to make of it. I get you.
Yeah.
Let's see. I guess maybe two more questions here. What strategies have you found effective in ensuring technology and nature can coexist in your media projects?
Well, uh, listen, I'm a big nature guy, and the the technology that I use, the Zoom, uh, 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 I think that's one of the most wonderful pieces of technology there is. And I mean, I've interviewed people in Lebanon and Egypt and
All over
Cameroon,
the world.
yeah,
Yeah.
all over the world, Australia, India. I mean, it's just it's wonderful that is absolutely priceless, and I love that technology, and it does bring people together, and it gives the opportunity to share. So that's so that and if you focus on redeeming things, climate change, homelessness, hunger. I used to do a lot of stuff with autism, women's health, nutrition. I mean, there's just so much to focus on. So there's a great balance, and there's a great opportunity uh, uh, to use technology uh, uh, with the media, the kind of media that we're doing. It's a wonderful opportunity that we've never had that before. I mean, uh, so I'm thrilled about the technology. And I try to stay on top of it as best I can. I just discovered, YouTube Shorts. Um, hey, you can. It's great. I
Yeah.
never did it before. I had a friend say, "Hey, do it. Throw something up there a minute and a half. Just experiment." So,
Yeah, and it's one of the ways I try to guide listeners to the podcast. I'll throw up clips and then I link the full video to it because maybe someone finds the conversation just super compelling and wants to hear more. But
smart.
but yeah, it's interesting that you gotta like cut up long form, hope that it leads back to the main dish, leaving breadcrumbs everywhere.
Funny, I
It's
do the
funny.
same thing, Joe. I make clips, and maybe that'll kind of inspire somebody to. You don't know. The best thing, one of my favorite things, is you throw stuff on a wall and you see what sticks. Um, I've been a big fan of that for a long time. Just throw it up on a wall and see what sticks.
Speaking of that, last real thoughts on AI. Do you want to say anything on that, or maybe any advice for people who we're
Well,
talking
as
about
it,
social advocacy a lot today?
uh, I find myself using AI a lot. Uh, and I'm from the generation that should be sitting out on the front porch reading the newspaper, drinking prune juice on the rocks. I'm not supposed to be on top of Chat GPT, or Copilot, or Gemini, or all these, but I find I use it a lot.
I'm
I had it,
impressed.
and I do, and even for simple little things, and I'll jump onto Copilot and ask it something, and boom, spit it out. And then, listen, I'm a journalist. I write my own stuff, but I had to write a semi-scientific, short article. And you know what? I was asked to do it, and politically, I had to do it, and I didn't want to do it. Um, and I said, gee, if I feed if I feed AI some of the stuff that I'm supposed to write about, maybe AI could do it for me. Let me give it a shot. So I gave AI what I wanted, what I needed. This little bit of science, a health issue. I'm not going to mention. I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not going to mention.
Yeah, yeah.
I gave it to AI, and about 90 seconds later, it spit out everything I wanted. Now, all I did was do a 3 sentence intro,
Personalize a little bit.
that in
Yeah.
2 sentences at the end, and sent it in, and they loved it. And I never said anything. So I use it. I ask it questions. I know it ain't perfect. It's learning too, but I use it. I use it. I asked it to do a bio of me, and said I had like 3 kids and only have 1 kid. So it's not perfect.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Last question today is just what it means to you to be more than rich, since that is the show's theme.
Uh, well, yeah. It's so a great question. When I embarked on my journalism career, and I got involved with NJ Discover, and we were doing the kind of programming, and I was doing the kind of articles, the autism. I mean, I really got involved with autism. I didn't know about it, and I learned about it, and the homelessness and the hunger, and the climate. I mean, the whole package. It was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. But I mean, I was told right from the start, the kind of stuff we're doing. There's no sponsors. There's no money. So, you
Didn't
know,
matter to you.
and I had to sell it to my wife out there. I'm doing all this work, and working 5 days a week, 6 days a week. There ain't no money, but you're doing it because it means something. You're doing it because, and there's a big asterisk to my last 12, 13 years. Everything I've done, everything I do. The big asterisk is, I'm on Social Security, so the government's taking care of me a little bit. Everybody helps, and so there isn't that gun to my head that I've got to. That's what I tell people honestly.
Yeah.
I'm doing things because I care to do it. And yeah, I wouldn't mind getting a couple bucks for doing this or doing that. That'd be nice, but it's a wonderful feeling. Look, I did get paid when I taught. Obviously, I was teaching at Rutgers. That was wonderful. And every once in a while, I write something, I get a couple of bucks. But there's never been in the 13 years I've been doing all this stuff. There's never been that thing. I gotta get money out of this deal. No, it's leaving with the feeling that you're doing something worthwhile and good, and maybe some of that is endorphins and makes you feel better. It kicks in. So there's so much out there, and maybe someday I'll get lucky, and I'll get a couple of bucks out of the deal. So be it. But that's not. It never has been. Um, it never has been. It's great. I used to run around for the last 12 years and tell people, "Hey, I don't pay taxes." So people would say to me, "What do you mean? You're going to get in trouble? You're going to go to jail? You don't pay taxes?" I said, "No, I don't pay taxes because I ain't earned anything.
Yeah.
There's nothing to tax." So
Yeah.
it just leaves me with the feeling of accomplishment, and it's a great feeling.
Yeah. I'd also agree that that's a lot more than what a lot of people prioritize today. Like, money is just one of the bad things that get stuck in our vice and most consumed by. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, if I'm 30 or 40 years old or 50 years old, you got to pay me. You got to pay me for what I'm doing.
Of course.
I understand, but I
Just
I
not your purpose for existing, though.
right.
That's the
It's
main
not.
point.
It's not. I do what I do because it's all give back.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good takeaway there. Anything you want to promote specifically? Websites? What your
Well,
books? How they can find it?
sure. My pretty much my website is simple. It's calvinschwartz.com. And my this is my baby. There's a tortoise
There's a
in my hair.
tortoise in my hair.
The Journey to Spirit. It did get the Kirkus Star, which is the highest honor they give to a novel. which was a complete surprise to me. So that's my baby. I promote that, my website, and Conversations with Calvin, We the Species, on YouTube. And I'm a pretty responsive guy. If people have questions or stuff, just reach out.
Awesome. And we'll drop those links down below. If you want to send me anything specific, email or anything, just feel
Yeah,
free to email that to
I'll
me.
send you an email. I'll send you an email with those links.
Awesome.
Perfect. If there's any other promo things you want, head pictures or stuff of me, just whatever you need, let me know. I'll send you, head pictures and stuff, and some whatever you
Yeah, I
need
got you.
going forward. Just reach out to me, and I'll send you anything you need.
Got you. And anybody else, if they might want to book a podcast with you as well, just email you maybe. Reach out.
Sure. Yep. You can go to calvinschwartz.com and drop me a note through there. And by the way, I'm inviting you to come on Conversation with Calvin. I'll send you a little note about that. I'll return
Absolutely.
a favor. You know what?
Would love it.
As a matter of fact, why don't I'll send you an email about that. Come on and I'll interview you. We'll change shoes.
Sounds good.
Yes.
All right. I'll let you know when this comes out. Thanks for your time today, Calvin.
Perfect. All right. Hey, this was great. I loved spending the afternoon with you. Your questions really blew me away. Amazing. You just nailed, truly, you just nailed such great stuff.
Appreciate it.
You really did. This was great, Joe. You made my day. That's a quote from Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry movies. Make my day. You made my day.
Love
So
it.
I'll be in touch with you on a bunch of things.
Definitely. And I'm sure we'll do a part 2 eventually.
Great. Love to.
Awesome.
Thanks,
All right.
Joe.
Take it easy.
All right. You.